The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Meemaw and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Ladies and gentlemen! Welcome to the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to bout number 125 of Cinesmack, the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, writer, actor, and director, Mr. Kyle Fine.
I don't share my side art very often on this, but I did write a 2-line poem for tonight. It is simply entitled My Childhood and goes as thus. Horse died, I cried.
Well done. Second
Thank
film.
you.
Haiku.
It's not nearly enough syllables.
Nope.
Oh, sorry.
You uncultured swine.
Gabe, you ignorant slut. Second filmmaker and owner of Arizona Inc. Studios, Mr. Andrew Zumwalt.
These look like big, strong hands, don't they?
Third filmmaker and owner of One Genome Short Productions, Mr. Rowald.
To the winch, wench.
Fair enough. Fourth filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Mr. Tom Haggis.
So stimulating being your hat.
Wait, what?
It's so stimulating being your hat.
All right.
It's from Labyrinth. No?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from Latin. I got it.
No, I got it too. I just
like
Do I need to do the voice? Is it the voice? I should do it with the voice?
Yes, do
It's
it
so
with
Yeah.
stimulating being your hat. I don't know. No, I'm not done.
That's pretty good.
All right, I'll do a different one. Smell
They all
bad.
have big, like, British voices.
Yeah.
Maybe if you perched upon my head, Tom, it would help.
I tried that, and it took me 3 months to get rid of the rash.
Ringworm's the son of a bitch, isn't it?
All right, I'm poking the monkey.
Ladies and gentlemen, childlike empresses and goblin kings, welcome to the main event. Tonight, two 1980s cult classics clamber into the ring to find out who will make it home and who will be devoured by the nothing. In the first corner, from 1986, written by Jim Henson and Terry Gilliam, directed by Jim Henson, starring David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly, and Toby Brown. Labyrinth! In the second corner, from 1984, written written by Wolfgang Peterson and Herman Weigel, directed by Wolfgang Peterson, starring Noah Hathaway, Barrett Oliver, and Tammy Stronach. The Never-Ending Story!
We're here to talk about two 80s classics. One of them traumatized me greatly, and I think I think Kyle's poem sums it all up for me. So let's do our first round, which is writing.
We're going to talk a lot about 80s movies tonight, and I think one of the things that we're going to touch on is why are we talking about these two movies? I mean, there's Last Unicorn and Legend, and there's lots of other movies that kind of fall into this 1980s fantasy film genre, and for some reason we're doing these two. Dark Crystal is another one, but these two seem to kind of be the kings, like the top of the pile. And in watching these, I was trying to figure out like why did these two endure so much? And I think a lot of it lies in the story. Both of them rely real heavily on. I'd say what they don't do. For example, in the movie Legend, like the lesson in Legend is very. There's not really a whole lot in Legend that you can apply to real life. I don't usually defeat evil on a daily purpose or a daily basis. But when you talk about things like NeverEnding Story and the theme of imagination and not giving up hope and not letting the nothing kind of consume you, which honestly in the last 18 months has really been a task. I mean, it's interesting that this movie is very applicable to everything that we're going through right now. And Labyrinth's message of don't be a bratty bitch is also something that people can use on a daily basis. And it's really the main point of what they're trying to get across is like, hey, don't be a bitch. So I think that's part of it. I think sometimes fantasy films have a problem of like taking their story and applying it to people in the real world. And as we get 30 and 40 years from these movies, I think we're starting to see movies that resonate decades after they come out because the stories are so easy to apply to our daily lives. So,
well, I think that's a very good assessment of why these movies endure. This is actually my first viewing of Labyrinth, and so I can't help but think how that colored my opinion of it. It was not a staple of my childhood. It's a movie that I picked up, at 38 years old. But NeverEnding Story was a very emotionally charged movie from my childhood. I think it's probably one of the first movies I can remember where I thought, oh, movies can be sad. Like, it's not always, cartoons and, gummy bears and, not gummy bears. What am I thinking of? Come on, the ones with the things on their chest. Care Bears. Care Bears. Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, that was a lot of my experience as a child. I watched a lot of cartoons and stuff, but I remember watching the NeverEnding Story and thinking, oh God, like I didn't think that art could be sad. I didn't know that it existed to make you feel that way. So it's a very formative experience for me. And Labyrinth does not meet that requirement for me for the nostalgia factor. But I have to say, there's not much I'm going to say about Labyrinth in the writing department that's very positive, but I will give it huge props because I think it's one of the only movies I've seen where you start with your protagonist being absolutely unlikable. You start with the protagonist being like the worst thing in the movie, and it doesn't go to like make you sympathetic to them before the story kicks into play. You just go, oh my God, she's really just a fucking jerk. And then she just acts like a jerk, and then this weird thing happens that has no explanation to it, and she goes on a mystical journey, and in the end, she's like, oh, I guess I shouldn't take things for granted, but it'd be cool if I could have a party in my room with all these characters and not talk to my family or show any growth or anything. So that was really weird to me. NeverEnding Story, I think, is an incredible piece of writing. And that it's the earliest movie I can pinpoint and think of that is metatextual in the way that it exists inside and outside the movie and interacts with the viewer, the reader of the book, and the characters inside the story. It also has a lot of themes that I think are really well handled, like imagination, hopes and dreams, being practical, standing up to bullies, getting lost in art. I mean, all these things that I think are super important and resonant with me. And in Labyrinth, I kind of came off feeling like David Bowie had a really good time. And I don't understand why he didn't wear a cup. And I have no idea why he's the king of an entire race that he shares nothing in common with.
Right. Yeah. How is he a goblin?
I guess I compare it also. We talk about how movies we watch now, how they're different and how we perceive them differently. And I would say that Labyrinth, the one thing I took away watching it this time was that, this is some old dude who is trying to take a 16-year-old girl and make her his slave to do whatever he wants for her or for him so she can have her brother back. And it seems a little creepier if you look at it from the weird, creepy uncle standpoint.
There was some creepiness in NeverEnding.
Especially if he's starting with the baby.
Yes, and if
he doesn't get the girl, at least he's got the baby.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a weird gamble he's taking. I'm gonna end up with something creepy.
So if you take away all of society as it is today, and you think back to, like we've talked about, our childhoods, both movies are fantastical. There's just so much magic and imagination that goes on in both movies, with the creatures, with these fantastical worlds, having to solve problems, having little mini quests here and there. And just, I think that entire wrapping up in these worlds as you watch them and you experience them when you're in that innocence, I guess, is the best way to put it, and that younger age. Sorry, Kyle, you didn't get that experience except for the NeverEnding Story. You also touched on something that I thought was probably maybe one of the first times I realized it too, which was the whole fourth wall being broken, and that the childlike empress was not only talking to Sebastian, but was talking to Atreyu and was talking to the viewer all at the same time. And that to me was quite just like, I'm like, wait, so this could really, as a kid, you think, is this really happening? And I think that added some fantasticalness to that movie to where it was more enjoyable. And of course they pushed that end over to where it's like, this movie technically never ends. There are so many other journeys and adventures and things that you could make up as a viewer and walk away with it, and it would be okay. And so I thought that was pretty cool, making those realizations. Artek's dying in the swamps of sadness is probably the first time I saw death on screen, like real death, not like westerns. So I think that was maybe a realization. I remember my sister crying so hard watching the horse die. So, I mean, and I mean, it introduced death in an interesting, positive. I don't know if positive is the best way to put it, but in a way that was realistic, but yet didn't really, because if you remember rightly, he's fighting and then they cut away before they actually see the horse die. So,
yeah.
So it's just, you're right. It's a heavy moment. It's a heavy scene. But they didn't do it in a way that made it hard, I guess. I'll be quiet because I know that Gabe wanted to jump in there. So,
I was just gonna say, they didn't actually show the horse go completely under in the swamp, but there were some shots afterward where he's sitting there and there's just like this spot where these bubbles are coming up in the swamp, and it's quite traumatic nonetheless. And that is a very traumatic moment. But, I think both of these movies were like targeted toward children, and I wonder, if the themes and those kinds of things were the kind of thing that children could understand at that time. I mean, I felt like it was both actually to a certain degree were somewhat dark. For children.
Oh yeah.
Labyrinth less so, but some of the themes and some of the things that they were trying to get at and discuss in NeverEnding Story were very, very adult and very dark. And I wondered if children at the time would get them, because they definitely weren't targeted toward adults. Well,
I mean, the death of his mother.
Yeah, which they really kind of don't. They don't really spend much time on that. You get kind of reference that his mother has died, but you don't know how or when or why, and you don't get a lot about that.
But that's the nothing, right? I mean, that's the being consumed by the grief and
what he's left with,
the hopelessness, and it's funny because we come back and we visit that again in Super 8. It's it's the same metaphor that they use in Super 8.
Yep.
So
and that's, at least that's rumored, one of the reasons why you don't hear the name that he yells at the end is because the idea is that it can be anybody's mother, it can be anybody's parent, that person gets associated.
The weird
I don't know
thing
how
is
true that
I
is.
heard very clearly what he said at the end.
Well, I know what he
Didn't
said.
Say Moonchild?
Well,
Moonchild.
yeah, he does. He does, and it's in the book too, the actual book. So,
are we to believe that was his mother's name?
And that Gerald McCraney from Simon and Simon was named Moonchild?
Hey, it was a different time then for him.
It was. He also drank eggs straight out of a blender, which is psychopath behavior.
Yeah, that was weird.
Hey, you know what? Back then, people didn't worry about salmonella.
Holy shit.
Orange juice and eggs.
Woof.
Yeah. Well, there's a smoothie for you.
He's trying to bulk up.
Dear God.
Unless this is a prequel to Rocky, that scene didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The references to things like the nothing and that being all-consuming grief and sadness, as well as the death of desire and dreams and hopes, and the world, becoming a more cynical and practical place. Yeah, I thought that stuff was incredibly well handled in a way that it's obvious to kids, but sophisticated enough and nuanced enough that it still hits when you're an adult. I feel like that's where Labyrinth fell short a little bit. That and its lengthy song breaks definitely hurt.
We'll get into later, but that was
the story.
But Labyrinth is also doing the same thing with all the creatures, treating her like garbage when she gets there, just like she was at the very beginning.
Sure.
So
yes.
There's that reversal. I'm not saying it's as well. What? Oh, no, it's true.
No. I'm waving Mike off. He's giving us the finger, and I'm just like,
this
is a good conversation.
He was communicating with
This is the best conversation we've had in 3 months.
But so there is some parallels, and I agree. I don't think it's as strong or as well done as it does in the NeverEnding Story, but there are that similarities where you have all of the creatures she meets right up front, and they're especially the worm that she meets right away in the maze is just a complete asshole to her, really. I mean, he's just mean. So there is some of that interesting parallelism.
But he did help her.
He did eventually help her, but once again, he grew just as well as she did. Yes. Not that they showed it as well, but
it's interesting you brought that up because I guess that's something I missed a bit. When she gets there, everybody treats her like trash until she starts accepting their help and treating them with respect.
Correct.
And acknowledging their usefulness in her life and like their autonomy in a way, like that they're not just all part of her story, like they're actually living, breathing creatures with their own life. And she starts treating them like that and showing them friendship and kindness, and they all become much more helpful to her, with the exception of that damn hogwart who gave her the apple. Which, by the way, is weird because as soon as she said that, she called him Hogwart, and I like jumped back in my seat because I've never seen Labyrinth. And I'm like, is that where the name for the school came from?
I wondered.
And Harry Potter?
I wondered that too. I didn't
then,
recall that. I'd seen Labyrinth when I was younger.
And then I
looked up. Didn't make any association with Harry Potter.
I looked up some shows that that some of the actors, the young actors in NeverEnding Story, have been in again, and one of them played a character named Harry Potter.
What?
And I was like, that's so weird. One of the actors in the NeverEnding Story played a character named Harry Potter, and in the Labyrinth, they call that guy Hogwart.
Huh.
That's crazy.
Crazy. That's
I think I'm onto
trivia.
a conspiracy here.
Let's leave that to Mike.
Yeah.
I bet you can find all of.
I can't beat that trivia.
I bet you can find all of Harry Potter's references in 80s movies.
Quite possibly.
I would not be surprised.
All right. Good conversation, you guys. But we've got to put it to a vote. Tom.
I'm going to have to go NeverEnding Story.
Okay. Kyle.
I have to vote for the movies based on who yelled Falcor and Atreyu most, and that way I am voting for A NeverEnding Story.
All right. Andrew.
Well, Morla told me I had to vote for the NeverEnding Story, so I trust in Morla.
And Gabe.
Yeah, I felt like Labyrinth was a little bit kind of jumbled. So I'm going to go with NeverEnding Story as well.
Okay. Monty Python member Terry Jones wrote the first draft of Labyrinth. Jim Henson then let others rewrite Jones's draft. At the end of the process, Henson went back to Jones saying the script had lost its humor and asked Jones to put the jokes back in. Jones then tried to pull it back into his original version, but had to retain some of the different directions the script had taken by that point. Jones's biggest problem with the final draft was that the center of the labyrinth was shown before Sarah got there.
Huh.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Two scenes.
It takes away some ambiguity of what the labyrinth represents.
Exactly,
by showing
right.
What leads to this castle. Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's puberty, right? Labyrinth is puberty.
It's all puberty.
Adolescence, maybe it's adolescence. Maybe it's not body hair, but, never mind. I'm going to pretend I didn't say that. Cut that part out. Cut that part out.
Oh, God,
Yeah,
that's great.
please don't talk about Jennifer Connelly and body hair.
Hey, that's okay. Oh,
Is it
I might
okay
need
to
to
say
sit
down.
because she grows up to be hot? It's weird, right?
Two scenes.
When I saw Labyrinth, I was young enough it would have been okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Two scenes from the book were written in the script of NeverEnding Story, but ultimately scrapped due to special effects limitations. The first was the initial appearance of Falcor, where Atreyu rescues him from, Gramule, the Many, a swarm of poisonous wasps, taking the form of a giant spider. This is where Bastian's scream being heard by the characters in the book was to have taken place. And it also explained why Atreyu and Falcor are later seen being given medicine by the gnomes. The second cutscene involved Atreyu and Falcor encountering the wind giants, giant creatures made of clouds, and being caught in a fight between them. This was re-edited into their close encounter with the Nothing before Atreyu falls into the sea.
Huh. But so did they redub the dialogue? Because the gnome, she herself, when she puts the needle in him, she says this is full of vitamins and good stuff.
Right. Well, no.
And you don't see her. You just hear her.
Well, they could not shoot that. So I don't think they went back in and...
Oh,
right.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
All right. Second round. Acting.
Oh, that's me. Oops. You didn't catch me unaware. I was pausing for dramatic effect.
You were acting.
Acting. Okay, so
That's a lot of drama.
It is. Pause makes heavy. That's what they say about heavy metal music. So one of the diciest things in the world when it comes to acting is acting with children. And when you watch Labyrinth, let's just start with Labyrinth, you see a baby who is incredibly patient and dealing with all this crazy horse shit that is happening around him in an amazing way. So for that baby, I give him enormous credit because I would have been terrified of all the things that were going on around him at that age. And Jennifer Connelly, who was 16 when this movie was made, you can tell that she has some chops and she is going to be a good actress if she keeps it up. And the way she acts opposite puppets and what are otherwise imaginary things, I think is also an incredibly difficult thing to do. So I commend her on that. I thought she did a really good job, with the exception of being such an absolute jerk. But that is the way that her character was written. And I think my issues with the movie stem more from the script than I do with her acting. Now, David Bowie is incredibly charismatic, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, and overall his music is, he's a prolific and highly skilled musician in many regards. But I thought his acting was pretty good, but his character was not fully fleshed out and was not given enough of a backstory or reason or pretty much anything to be truly intriguing. He was all right, window dressing for things, but I didn't feel like his character was very good, to be honest. The side characters are interesting, but very one note. The puppetry and all of that stuff, which I'm sure we'll get more into in overall, is superb. In both of these films, the practical effects, the way people interact with them, the way they're set up in stage, the way they are part of the story, I think is all, remarkable, truly remarkable, and should be commended as well. Now I'll get to the acting in A NeverEnding Story, where I think the kids acting in this movie were very strong. And that's rare, especially for movies this old. I think child acting has gotten a lot better. Kids are getting into acting much younger, and there are many resources available to them. But I thought they were great, and they really held up their ends of the story, considering a lot of this movie is simply one child or the other experiencing the story. Especially the actor who plays Atreyu has to do a ton of physical work and show a wide range of emotions, and does so really well. So those are my thoughts on the acting for these movies.
So my only question is, in Labyrinth, in the scene with the song "You Remind Me of a Babe," when they're tossing the baby around and the baby is screaming and so my question is the baby just terrified of what is going on, and they went, just go with it, it fits? Because that's the one scene where then as a kid you're just like, oh, okay, whatever. But now I think of it and I'm like, wow, like, was the child actually terrified that it was in this moment and they just kind of filmed it and got lucky? Or was it like, hey, we can't do this 20 more times, so the baby's crying, let's just move on? It fit the moment. It fit the moment, but you would think that
the baby went totally method on that.
Yeah.
Well, and I would just think, like, in today, like, again, we look at parallels, today's society. I'm not sure how people would react to this child being it looks terrified in those moments. It's not like they went to the baby and said, okay, so this next part, we're going to be throwing you around. It really won't be you, but I want you to be screaming your bloody head off and looking like you are. Yeah, that didn't happen, right? And I'm sure there were people on set helping with the baby and everything, but man, that scene is almost, it's kind of cringy nowadays. It just seems weird when I think of how do you get that baby to be like that? I don't know. So, acting, I think Kyle did a pretty good job. I was going to bring out Atreyu, and also the female that played the childlike empress. She is just incredible. She is so calm and smooth, and is this voice of like reason, almost like your conscience in the movie, and does it so well with such power and such passion and compassion all at the same time. And I was, truly impressed now watching it, when watching someone like that at that age act in those scenes. And it was very impressive. So I will piggy on you, Kyle, because that was incredible.
I truly thought for a moment, is this a very short adult? Like, is this an adult with some disability is the wrong word, but you have people who are very large and imposing, and they have like a pituitary gland disorder, and they use that for part of their acting. I was like, is this possible? This is a shrunken adult, like a very small petite adult, or they're shooting an adult in a way that makes her look like a child, because it just didn't fit with what I expected from a kid in an acting role.
I would agree.
She was so emotive and like forceful and authoritative, but kind. She had a lot of emotions going on. I thought that was really interesting.
And speaking of your Noah Hathaway with Atreyu, I'm just curious how many, and this may be trivia, so I don't want to take it, but he did do a lot of physical things. How much of it was stunts? How much of it was him? I know that he did ride horses for a good portion of the film, which, again, now you're adding animals on top of children.
Yeah, and you have to remind us of the horse.
I know.
Well,
geez.
Yeah, I was.
He gets Artex.
I was okay with Atreyu's performance overall, but then I read an article about why you should not watch NeverEnding Story as an adult, because how it kind of ruins it for you. And one of the things they said is that the actor who played Atreyu just screamed all his lines all the time. and I knew this as I was watching it, and I'm like, I don't hate it. He's doing a good job, but he is kind of just screaming all of his lines all the time. He just he didn't have the kind of nuance in that the princess had. It's amazing that she was in such a small portion of that film, and her performance was really stellar. I mean, she's crying, and she had more nuance than Atreyu did. And also probably more than Bastian. Bastian was a little stiff. They as child actors, I thought they did a great job. And I probably shouldn't be too harsh on them. But she was like way beyond what they were doing. Because seriously, like in the short amount of time that she had, she had these like really nuanced presentation, and she was crying and all that stuff, and she was really quite fantastic.
Bastian felt awkward at times, but I don't know.
He did.
If that was him,
but he seemed like a kid.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what you expect out of kids, a little bit.
I think a lot of credit needs to go to. I mean, David Bowie just looked like he was having an absolute blast on the set, and I've seen enough episodes of The Muppet Show to know when they go wrong. Where the stars are kind of just like, I don't know what I'm doing here, and that could have really easily happened. And there's a really great story in Jim Henson's biography about Brian Henson, like pleading with his dad to bring David Bowie on to play the role. He's like, he would be perfect for it. And Jim Henson was, did I take your trivia? Oh, sorry. And Brian Henson knew that David Bowie would be so great for it. And, he was right. Because I think the movie really, no matter how bad Jennifer Connelly got, I think the movie really hinges on how well David Bowie handles it. And he did just with, to great effect. The other thing too, before we leave acting, I want to talk about the puppeteering, because I think that needs to fall here. And I feel that Labyrinth is, it's a clear cut above what they do in NeverEnding Story. And we'll get to special effects later on, and I think there's a distinct difference between these two movies in terms of special effects. But the puppeteering in Labyrinth and the practical creatures that they make they hold up really, really well. And I'm going to count acting under that because there are so many characters that were created that way. So when I take that into consideration, I'm leaning heavily towards Labyrinth just because so many of the characters. There were a lot of times when I was watching Labyrinth where I fell out, where it kind of pulled me out when I saw something that was very obviously a Muppet. The wolf at the end when he's talking to betray you. Yeah,
nothing's the minion.
Yeah.
And the rock eater was a little distracting at times too.
Yeah, it looked like a creature on a ride at Disney World from 1960s and very mechanical. Whereas I think all the characters in Labyrinth, just about every single one, is handled really, really well by the puppeteers.
Isn't that a difference between a Jim
Yeah.
Henson?
Right.
I mean,
So
those people, those puppeteers, Frank Oz and all his buddies, they're fantastic, really.
I mean,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
I mean, they are the gold standard, and it begs you have to ask yourself, how good would NeverEnding Story be if Jim Henson had done Jim Henson Workshop had been in on it?
Oh yeah.
Honestly, if you could combine Jim Henson's puppetry and practical effects with the NeverEnding Story, you probably end up with the best fantasy movie of the 80s, hands down.
Oh yeah.
Because it's interesting you brought that up, and it brought a thought to my mind, and I wonder if maybe we can share a second on it. Can you think of someone and their chosen art form that was so clearly above everybody else, and it still stands up 40 years later, than Jim Henson and his puppeteering? Because I can't think of anyone and a group of people like Jim Henson and his puppeteers who created such a clear-cut excellence in art that was so far above what everybody else, even the good people, were doing, and it holds up for, what are we, 45 years later or something like that? It's just crazy to watch these movies. Okay, yes, John Williams' music is for sure up there, yes. But when I watched Labyrinth, and I had never seen it before, and I've seen some Muppet movies. We watched one of them this year for the podcast. But I was never a huge Muppet person, and I was just blown away by the puppeteering. And even when he does some of the funny things, like just little hand acting, like some of the mime stuff that he does, and the setups that he creates for that, it's truly incredible.
Oh, yeah. I think some of my favorite parts of Labyrinth were the Muppets.
For sure.
For sure. There's that, and one of the very first instances of it, when she is about to say the words that are going to take her baby brother away to the goblin world or whatever. And it's just that, all those goblin faces in one shot, looking like, say it, I know. And I'm like, that is so fun. That is so cool. And there really is something to be said about that. And what have we watched for the podcast, Mike? But we did Emmett Otter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Talk about great
And
puppeteering.
And
then what was the other one? The Christmas
Muppet Christmas Carol.
Fantastic.
Which was amazing. Yeah, amazing.
Fantastic stuff.
All right. That's the end of the round. Let's put it to a vote. Kyle.
Damn it, Tom. I was so ready to vote for NeverEnding Story, and then you brought up Jim Henson, and you brought up David Bowie being a charisma monster, and I'm gonna let Tom sway me, and I'm gonna vote for Labyrinth on the strength of the puppets alone.
All right, Andrew.
I'm not letting Tom sway me. Sorry, Tom. But I will say that the puppeteering is amazing, and I have to vote for Jennifer Connelly because she can act any day in front of me anytime she wants. So Labyrinth.
My.
Yikes.
Gabe.
Yeah. I don't think this is Jennifer Connelly's best performance.
I didn't say that.
It's true. Yeah, that's for later. God, I don't know. This one is tough because the kid actors in NeverEnding Story were pretty good, and obviously the puppeteering in Labyrinth is great. I don't know. Tom, tell me what to do. What should I do?
I got it. There are so many puppets in this. You know, you lose them if they're not great. So I'm going Labyrinth on mine. So
David Bowie. Bowie in space.
Remind me of the babe. What babe? The babe with the power. What power? The power of voodoo. Voodoo. Remind me of the babe.
Yeah, I'll go with Labyrinth.
Woohoo!
All right. Noah Hathaway was due to appear in the Broadway show Chaplin alongside Gene Kelly and Anne Margaret, but opted to do the NeverEnding Story instead. He had been cast in the film, then the original director was fired, and when Wolfgang Peterson was hired, Noah was immediately rehired. Michael Jackson, Prince, and Mick Jagger were considered to play the Goblin King. Jim Henson preferred Sting until his kids convinced him David Bowie, who had reached his peak of mainstream popularity with the Let's Dance album, would be best suited for it. Bowie wanted to make a children's movie, liked the concept, and found the script funnier and more amusing than many other contemporary special effects movies.
Boy, that would be weird with Michael Jackson tossing a baby around.
Right?
You have to wait a long time for him to do that.
Yeah, you do. All right, let's move it on to our third round, which is directing.
I'm going to start with the NeverEnding Story because I think I have more to say about Labyrinth for the directing. The NeverEnding Story, there are some, and I know we're probably going to overuse this word, but there are some fantastical shots, and a lot of those shots are made up of these creatures and these aliens, but these fantastical creatures that live in this world of Fantasia, and the sets, and they have all this stuff, and they do these just really cool wide shots of these, the plains, and then the rocks and the rock biters, and he moves throughout this world so well that yes, you move through this world so well that it seems so big, and that they filmed some on location, but there was other parts that were filmed on a soundstage, but he makes it just so like almost endless. And they do such a good job of building basically your imagination on film with all these different little pieces of the worlds that he goes to, and different parts and different friends that they run into and enemies. And it's really cool. I mean, from the Southern Oracle to the Luck Dragon, and having the gnomes and all the creativity, and being able to take all of that and piece it together to be able to make this, I guess, visual coherence that made it fantastical was quite that's quite a feat. I mean, wow. You've got to have a head for that. The shots of Bastion actually in the school, I don't know where they found that school, but I'll tell you what, if I went to a school like that where I could just go up into the creaky old scary castle attic that was up there with all the, I mean, I don't know who has a storeroom in their old school like that, that you can go to, that no parent, teacher, or anyone in between goes looking for their missing child who hasn't been in any of his classes today.
And hasn't come home.
And hasn't come home. And no one's
like
looking. No one is looking for him. But there are some really, really cool shots up in that attic room. Real low shots, dark, lightning and thunder. There's a lot of cool, creepy stuff in there that adds a lot of just really neat frame shots that I really, really enjoyed. I want others to get a chance to talk, so I'm trying to go quick. Labyrinth, the one thing that I particularly picked out is we talk about how difficult it is to shoot like with kids and animals and stuff. So if you really think about, minus some of the creatures that obviously were people dressed up, and there were a lot of probably performers on set that were doing puppeteering or, you know, planning for some visual effect later, such as, you know, them tearing their heads off and her throwing them around and things like that. Really, the director was working basically with Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie. Like, he was basically directing those two to interact with all these other fantastical characters that were around them. And that takes a lot of credit to me. I mean, it's hard enough to work with, like we've said, with kids and animals and things, but to have two humans and you basically are carrying it, and then the rest of it's like, okay, so now all the puppet actors have to play their role, but they're not, it's not like you can walk over to a goblin puppet and be like, okay, now I want you to give me this, you know. It's much more difficult, and to be able to, in a sense, choreograph all of that while still pulling off getting your young actor and then David Bowie to do these performances was, I mean, that's a feat in itself. I think we had talked about this a little bit in the Christmas Carol, with having humans mixing in with all of these Muppets. I can't imagine that is an easy task to be able to blend all of that together and be able to direct that effectively. And I felt that it was fun and energetic in most of the places. So that's my quick spiel. I'm trying to be nice because I know we've gone over in the other two rounds, so I'm trying to be nice to Mike. So you guys jump in, get some.
He doesn't care.
Get some airtime in.
I think one of the both directors do a fine job with them. You know, I don't know if there's really anything particularly like stunning about them, and you know, Wolfgang Petersen's a great director. Most of his films are fantastic, but yep. I think the thing that really, I think in this category, one of the things that really sets it apart is the editing, and I feel like the NeverEnding Story editing is clunky. There's some editing that they had to do kind of around some of the less, I don't know what you say, good, some of the less good special effects and puppeteering that they had. Labyrinth does a great job of like you said, making everything kind of seamless. But I think like for example, at the beginning of NeverEnding Story, when the Rock Muncher, is that his name? Rock Muncher, Rock Eater, Rock Biter.
Yeah, Rock Biter.
Oh,
Rock
Biter.
Yeah.
Yep.
When he's sitting there and chomping on those rocks, and it's cutting between the guys down on the ground and the rocks coming out of his mouth, it's really good. I mean, they really took some care to make that stuff line up. And then by the end, it's just kind of weird, like, you know, Falkor fetching the pendant off the bottom of the ocean. There's these weird kind of dissolve because they didn't know how for him to pick it up, I guess. I think they got Falkor in the water and went, shit, we don't know how he's going to get it with his tooth. So
well, a lot of the flying with Falkor when it comes to visual effects are weird.
Yes. Yeah. It's very, very not very good green screen, and I don't think it would have passed Jim. I don't think Jim Henson would have let shots like that leave the studio. So,
or
you know, again, I think this is another category where we kind of see the power of Jim Henson and the lack of what we, you know, what we get with the other guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I felt like I felt with Labyrinth, I felt like editing. I've actually, for both, I felt like editing was a little bit of a problem, and they did have to kind of edit around some of the visual effects or some of the story problems. There were times where I felt like there were these major jumps. And I didn't understand, like, well, how did we get here? You know, why did we jump so far in these stories? But, you know, imagine trying to bring these things to life at the time with what was available to you from, a visual effects and special effects standpoint.
Yeah. Can you imagine him coming to you and being like, we need to make a luck dragon and we need to make it, 30 feet long. People have to be able to ride this thing and it has to be able to interact with all the characters. It needs an emotive face. It's got to have shimmery scales and fur. It's got to have a big tail. And it has to do all these scenes where it's interacting with people and things. So go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and even with the rock biter and the other characters. And then there was that scene, you referenced it, Andrew, where he was talking about his hands and how he couldn't hold on to his friends as the nothing came. Which is really very depressing. But he couldn't hold on to his friends. And I just felt like that was very abrupt. Like we kind of get introduced to these characters who you feel are like allies on this quest. And then they kind of disappear for a while Atreyu, stomps through the swamp and goes to various places. And then when we meet up again, these characters are just gone.
Because nothing took them.
Well, yeah, but I feel like that was like an error in maybe directing or editing. It's like, well, why are they just gone? Why did we not see that happening? Why did we not see them, trying to contribute to this effort? It just felt really abrupt.
Because a human was the only one that could do it.
Right. So
and kids can't relate.
So our speed snail didn't matter.
Well, and I mean, they did show, the rockbiter and the snail and a lot of the characters while the luck dragon would fly over. Especially at the end, they showed them, there again. So I don't know if it's necessarily. I guess I look at it from the perspective of they're trying to focus on making the relation of Atreyu as the main character, and you're focused on him because you can relate to him because he's a child like you are, and instead of these fantastical creatures. But I see your point, but you also have to think of it as the nothing is consuming. It's taking away your friends. It's taking away your life. It's consuming who you are, and so you're losing all of the things around you if you let it.
Right.
And so there's that connection.
Sure.
So I'm sure there was technical stuff involved too, but I mean, story-wise, I guess I look past all of that. And
I think, from a technical difficulty though, both of them really had their challenges ahead of them. From a visual effects and technical.
Yeah, because even like the Labyrinth, the scene that I brought up where she ends up taking the heads off of the weird, crazy monkey-like creature, that's probably the worst scene in all of Labyrinth. It's so bad, and it's
and what does it contribute to the story?
It's a goofy point? Yeah, it's a goofy moment, and it's fun. And as kids, you don't really realize it, but watching it now, it's like very obvious there are black hands pulling, these these heads off. And I mean, it's just really weird. It's a very awkwardness compared to the rest of the film. And so I think there was more, it was the 80s. There are a lot of technical issues that I think you may run into that we wouldn't even think about these days because of computers and with some of the talent that has grown from these type of movies.
Which is funny because if these movies came out now, there's probably a 50-50 chance that they would not pass muster with kids. I don't think there's a really good chance that kids would not buy into it as too believable. I mean, there's something about having an actual physical. I mean, Star Wars taught us anything. People are going to relate to something that the other actors are actually physically interacting with. I mean, it's still getting better, but there's a lot of people just put crap out just because they can.
Well, I mean, in the 80s, we had our imagination if you wanted to do something. We didn't have video games and phones, and if you wanted to hang out with friends, you had to go outside. You didn't just get on the computer or your phone and talk to them or take pictures. And so, I mean, the culture is totally different. And, at least I did. I grew up learning that my play space was my imagination with my friends and with yourself, that you could build these times where you can keep yourself busy instead of pulling out your handbrain and being able to touch all of your friends and take pictures and whatever else,
Yeah,
Okay.
but Major Dad said all that's a fucking waste of time. So
Well, that's true.
You called him
And he's
Major
Major
Dad.
Got a Simon and Simon reference
yeah.
in earlier. Anybody else?
Oh, yeah.
I'm waiting for the third Gerald McCraney.
We're going a little long, but Kyle,
I
did you
know.
have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, sorry. I've just been enjoying the conversation. I think these are some of the hardest types of movies to conceptualize and bring to life. And I can't imagine how much more difficult that was made by setting this 40 years ago. Now, if you wanted to create something, whether you're good at it or not, it's fairly easy to do with some computer software and a few tutorials from YouTube. Back then, if you wanted to create something, you had to have an army of puppeteers, sculptors, painters, lighters, cameramen, everything like that to to bring these things to life. And that's an art that a lot of movies miss now. And I'm going to sound like an old man stomping my feet on the yard, but I marvel at these movies when I watch them, whether I personally enjoy them greatly or not. They are feats of technical craftsmanship that are important and remarkable in art, especially when you talk about Jim Henson and his puppets. I mean, I think they are national treasures, and I don't think that's too high a praise. I think they're really cultural icons. NeverEnding Story is definitely a lot rougher. It really is. I think its green screen work may be a little bit better in places, but it's very hit or miss. The puppetry and some of the creations are not quite as good. I thought the Luck Dragon was very good. Its scale was a bit wonky to me, considering how huge its head was. But I thought it looked great. It had a lot of emotion, and that was a character that I fixated on as a kid. Mm-hmm. Was the Luck Dragon. I thought it was so cool. But yeah, I think one of the strong points of NeverEnding Story is knowing that it doesn't have Jim Henson's puppets. And so sometimes it doesn't show all of them. Like when he has the fight at the end with the wolf, it's not much of a fight. It's a quick dash and then a stab. And I was talking to Heather about this, and she goes, "Man, that's not much of a fight." And I said, "You know what, though? I think that's the right decision, because that puppet probably looks like shit when it's not in that cave."
Yeah.
And that's the problem. If you think back, I love Alien. Alien's a really good movie. But the one scene in that movie that stands out is when the alien jumps out and puts his hands towards the camera, and you go, "Oh." It's like, because a lot of the tension and stuff is built by not knowing what this creature looks like, how big it is, where it can be, and what the danger is. And when you see it like that, it pops that balloon. And so I think NeverEnding Story avoided some of that by not showing all its puppets all the time. And the ones that were good, like the rock biter, like the bat, like the racing snail, for some, just as a few examples, it focused on. And I thought that was a really good choice by the filmmakers. It kind of hid its weaknesses and focused on its strengths, which I think is something that's really hard to do, because it's hard to see the forest for the trees on that. Whereas Jim Henson just decided, I'm going to show these things off because they're fucking awesome. So he just shows off puppets and his creations, his sets, his artistry and creating false walls and forced perspectives and all these things. It's really great. Yeah, these movies seem like such a pain in my ass to direct. I think I would lose my mind trying to bring these things to life, especially if you told me I could only work with what they had in the 80s.
Yep. Good
in
point.
the 80s, you had to build something out of a pipe cleaner and duct tape. Today, they would just go to a computer.
Yep.
You know what? It reminds me of just real quick. No shit. Yeah. Real quick. In the movie, when Atreyu says yes to talk to the Southern Oracle, and someone says it's 10,000 miles away, I imagine that would be my response if you told me I had to direct Labyrinth, or NeverEnding Story. Just that deflated, like, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Over 10.
Too
All
far.
right.
It's too far.
Let's put it to a vote, everybody. Andrew.
I'm going to go with the Labyrinth on this one.
All right. Gabe.
Another tough one. I don't know. I'm gonna go NeverEnding Story.
Oh, all right. Tom?
Labyrinth.
I don't know if that was quick enough, Tom.
Trying to help you out, man. Try to save some time. Now look at now we're talking about other
Kyle.
shit.
Despite some of its roughness and all the praises I heaped on Jim Henson, I'm going to vote for NeverEnding Story.
All right.
Traitor.
You swayed me earlier. I gotta get some of my self-respect back.
I didn't get much in on directing. You're right. I need to try hard. Okay.
Producer George Lucas chose not to do any interviews during the release of Labyrinth as to not steal Jim Henson's thunder, who was at the time one of his best friends. And Labyrinth is Jim Henson's last directed feature film.
Huh.
So I didn't realize.
Steven Spielberg helped with editing and marketing of the NeverEnding Story to get it prepared for the American market. He did it for his friend, director Wolfgang Petersen, which resulted in a more cleaner cut of the film.
Oh my God. That's incredible. It was
crazy,
worse.
Isn't it?
Oh, God.
I'm sorry. The editing in NeverEnding Story is not good. It's
Yeah,
clunky.
but to have Steven
It is
Spielberg
Yeah,
clunky.
help you.
it's not.
How do you turn that down?
As someone who just went through all 36 48-hour film projects, I can tell you that the editing in NeverEnding Story is amateurish. I have seen it. I know it when I see it.
All right. Fourth and final round overall.
Okay, well, I think it's important for us in this round to talk about music, at least a little bit, because, you know, David Bowie was in Labyrinth. So I want to hear what you guys thought about the music in these movies, and maybe specifically the kind of the almost like musical breaks in Labyrinth. There were a couple of scenes where it almost kind of went into musical category, but didn't really. So I don't know. Let's hear your thoughts on the music in these movies.
I don't hate the music in Labyrinth. I just, I've gotten used to it. So
I'm not sure it has aged all that well.
Not a lot of
very 80s
Yeah.
music, which is okay. I'm not saying it's bad, but it like you hear it and you're like, okay, this is very like time specific. It's very 80s.
yeah, it was made in the
Yeah,
80s, so that would
it's-
make sense.
Well,
I mean,
watch a
yeah,
watch a
it's true,
musical
but-
that was
You know,
made in
I-
the 60s. Come on.
But
It's-
I think some of these, there are movies from, other time periods that don't necessarily like scream that time period and have aged a little bit better. Like the music is still kind of relatable a little bit, but I
I can't
just
think
felt
of
like
I can't think of a single one.
none.
I
Not a
would
single
say
one. I feel-
both- I would
Seriously?
I would
Not-
say
not a
both
single one.
movies fall into this category though, because even the theme song to the NeverEnding Story is very 80s. Like
And
it's
Oh
very,
yeah, oh yeah.
music-
No, they both fall into that category for sure.
When the music is written specifically for the movie, I just feel like you're just kind of taking a golden stake and sticking it in the year and being like, "This is when we made this fucker," and I think I can't think of any song that was in a movie. Like I'm thinking about like Shaft and all of the James Bond songs, and you're just letting everybody know what year this movie came out.
Eastbound and
Yep.
Down.
That's not a movie.
but I mean, but
no
but
TV
even-
shows.
No,
Even-
I'm
even
no,
like-
I'm thinking of Smokey and the Bandit.
oh yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't scream 1978. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, even pull like other 80s movies that had popular, so like Dirty Dancing, Short Circuit, all of those type of movies had popular movies, or pop songs from that time period. Like you can go back to any of those, and whether they were sung or they were just, actually in the background, just as, filler, exactly when this movie was made because of the music. Dazed and Confused was, they're all that way. So I guess that to me is a little less, because I expect that to age along with the age of the movie.
What did you think of the almost kind of like musical breaks in the movies, though?
But
in
okay,
Labyrinth?
so
like
the
it's
song
almost
you
like it
remind
breaks
me of
out to become a musical,
right?
But it's kind of not. It's not really.
I still quote you remind me of a babe. What babe? The babe with the power. What power? The power of voodoo. Hoodoo. You remind me of a babe. I still quote that. The dance number where they do the ball, that's about the weirdest part of the entire
the
musical
ball,
numbers.
Yeah, the ballroom scene where.
Yeah, I remember as a kid just being like, "This is weird."
Did anyone get any creeps from either of those movies? Because that was a little bit creepy. Like he was like almost like in love with this like prepubescent girl, and then there was the weird thing in NeverEnding Story where he's kind of first introduced to the Luck Dragon, and the Luck Dragon's like, I like children. And here, come rub my, touch me,
but,
rub me. Oh, that's good.
When somebody's entire world is built around imagination and fantasy, I think those people tend to be fans of children. I just,
Yeah. I mean, you could say the same thing about Mr. Rogers, because like Mr. Rogers. Yeah, but you're applying it now. And you have to think back as a child, even Mr. Rogers was, if you were to ask him, he likes children. That he doesn't mean that in an inappropriate way. He means it as he enjoys bringing joy and life to, kids and helping expand their minds. I guess I don't see it that way. People would definitely take it socially that way differently now, hands down.
Yeah,
and I think
we judge these things through the lens of the current times, but.
There
were a couple of those things.
David Bowie
even you said
at the beginning.
The Labyrinth thing was a little bit creepy.
It is.
It is, and so was the thing in NeverEnding Story where it's like, I like children, and come rub me. Ooh, that's good. That was a little bit weird.
No, it's not.
It was. It was a little bit weird.
I have a dog and a cat.
It was intended to be that way. Just came across as a little.
I have pets, and they come up and they rub against my leg and are like, "Hey, that feels good. Pet me." And it's not sexual. It's just like that's ridiculous.
They're not children. It's not the other way around. I don't know. I thought the musical breaks in Labyrinth were a little bit of a distraction. It was kind of like, okay, we have David Bowie and he's writing these songs. Right. So we're going to kind of turn this section into a little bit of a musical. But
definitely, they're very happy they got David Bowie, and it showed.
If they had stuck with that, if like the whole movie was kind of like a musical, okay, fine. But it's like they did that and then they went back to like non-musical.
Right.
But
and I felt like it was a little bit weird. Like they couldn't decide what they wanted to do.
I think they had David Bowie and they wanted to use him like David Bowie would have been used, not in a sexual way, Gabe, but they wanted to use David Bowie. It was the birth of music videos, and it's just what they were gonna do. It wasn't until Christopher Nolan used David Bowie in The Prestige when people were like, "Hey, he can act too, so he doesn't need to
an actor."
It would have been cool though to see him as Edison, like breaking this song.
Oh God!
What would he have sung in The Prestige?
That was Tesla, by the way.
He was Tesla.
Yeah, he played Nikola Tesla.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah. Oh, Nikolai Tesla's gonna haunt me tonight.
He will.
But but
you'll be shocked.
I see Labyrinth. I see Labyrinth though as more of the way that I see Jim Henson movies though, because even look at almost, a lot of his Jim Henson movies, the Muppet movie, for instance, there's lots of songs in there. It's not a consistent song every time like you would consider a musical, but there are songs in a Jim Henson movie. And I guess I look at it in that perspective versus the NeverEnding Story. There's never really like musical numbers. There's music.
That's a good point. All the Muppet movies have musical breaks in them.
Yep.
Does Dark Crystal have music in it? I don't remember Dark Crystal very well.
It does. The guys that do the and they have the little like tribal drum thing that they do. It's not a huge one, but there is some music in it.
But we're not going to.
No. I guess I just look at it as you've got Muppets singing and dancing, and that's traditional to Jim Henson. And it just so happens that we now have David Bowie, who's going to add all this amazing other aspect of music to it. And the music isn't singing in the sense of they're singing their lines and they are pushing the story forward, which I see as more of a musical.
And they're throwing a baby.
Yeah, they're throwing a baby. Versus the NeverEnding Story, which is there's music in the background, but the music is never actually.
I didn't feel like that in NeverEnding Story. Yeah. It didn't break into like a musical moment. NeverEnding Story.
No, it was distracting in Labyrinth. They let David Bowie have the stage, and he went with it. And obviously, that's what they wanted. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not necessarily blaming him, but it was distracting because it didn't really fit with, I think, the tone of the rest of the movie in places.
Ballroom scene.
Actually, I think
ballroom scene. Yeah.
If they had done
felt like
more,
a music video,
it might have actually been better. Like if she's going through the labyrinth and she meets these characters and there's a little musical number. The one where he was the ballroom scene was a little weird. The one where he's singing with all the goblins and tossing the baby in the air was a little distracting. But I think the worst one to me was the fire creatures or whatever, where they were trading.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
that one really came across like a cut Muppet Show sketch.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it just didn't fit. I didn't know why they did it there. And then on top of it, they had really kind of like not great visual effects. That scene was not really well done from a visual standpoint overall. But I think if they had like latched onto that and said, "Look, well, let's make this a musical," and like when you're introduced to various characters at various points, there's a musical scene, and maybe it was written by David Bowie. Cool, I think that would have been awesome. But it just seemed a little bit odd to me that they just kind of randomly threw some in there.
They're in this weird middle ground.
Yeah, it was kind of halfway.
My one overall thing that I felt really weird going back and doing all the review stuff is that on IMDb, Labyrinth is slated as an adventure family fantasy, whereas the NeverEnding Story is considered an adventure drama family, which I think is really interesting.
Well, NeverEnding Story is definitely more adult in its themes.
I would agree 100%. And I just find it interesting. There's fantasy is not a part of the categorization.
That stuff is so hard. I've always felt like those kind of categories, those genres are like so fluid. It's hard to know.
Yeah, I guess I'm pointing out that one is Labyrinth is definitely more fun and lighthearted overall versus the NeverEnding Story, which, like you said, deals with some more adult topics in a potentially kid-friendly way.
Does anybody think that Labyrinth is really just the girl coming home to babysit and she's fed up with it, and she just goes on like an acid trip instead of taking care of the baby.
Like Where the Wild Things Are.
But yeah, I guess.
She came home and the baby was still hot.
Okay.
Oh my God.
All right. We're going to stop it right there. And we're going to put it.
What if she got struck by lightning?
That was for you, man. That was for you.
We're going to put it to a vote. Gabe.
And Toby was still
Mike,
hot.
I was gonna say Mike's not even gonna bother. It's just we're ending the round on that. We are not moving forward. We're done.
All right, I'm gonna go Labyrinth in this round.
All right, Tom.
So I know I voted twice for Labyrinth, but I'm gonna vote for NeverEnding Story because ultimately I think it is the better movie.
Okay, Kyle.
Yeah, it's the never-ending story.
Oh my God,
Damn.
Andrew.
You're pitchy, dog.
Just say her name.
Moonchild.
The never-ending story.
All right. The owl in the title sequence for Labyrinth is computer generated.
No.
The
Dude, you just
first
crushed my childhood
Are you
dreams.
serious?
Oh God! Way to break the illusion, Dick.
the first attempt at a photorealistic CGI animal character in a feature film.
Photo what?
Photorealistic.
Sorry, one more time.
Realistic.
Playing real fast and loose with these words.
Yeah.
I think it's pronounced photo-ish.
Photo-ish. No.
Realistic.
I've heard it also pronounced as
photo-ish,
photo-distracting.
realistic-ish.
That seems to me a George Lucas influence on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Contrary to internet rumors, the horse did not really die during the filming of the Swamp of Sadness scene, as confirmed by German magazine interview with Noah Hathaway shortly after the movie. And in the years since at conventions, the horse was given to Noah at the end of filming, but due to the cost of transportation, need for quarantine, and sterilization, the horse was left behind in Germany.
To run the fields on its own, free as a normal broken horse would be.
Lived a long time, and then
We have a nice glue factory for the horse.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
the horse is good.
Hey, not bringing us back to JELLO, eh?
I tell you what's a fun game that I play with Heather a lot if you watch these movies with other people. When you watch a very old movie, say 30 years older later, and you see a cat or a dog or a horse, you go, oh, did you know that horse still alive? That horse still acts? And just watch him go, what? The older the movie, the funnier it is. Like if you do like Rear Window and you're like, that cat's still an actor.
I can't remember if I've talked about this, but I have worked with a gaffer that did the gaffing work for Flipper, the entire run of Flipper, and for Gentle Ben.
Wow.
The TV show?
Yes.
Wow, for Flipper?
Yes.
Wow.
Was it one dolphin?
He has
Or was it multi-dolphins?
I think it was multiple dolphins. George doesn't really talk about that stuff. He just, I worked on Flipper. And that's about it. He's just...
He worked on Flipper, but doesn't want to talk about working on Flipper.
No, well, and he lit the very first Super Bowl as well. They brought him in to light the very first Super Bowl.
Wow.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep. All right. Recommendations. Let's start with Tom.
So I know I've said on the podcast before, I really hate fantasy movies. I like these two for some reason, but I just don't like it. And so I went to IndieWire, and they did a really cool top 40 fantasy films. And it's interesting because they include like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and It's a Wonderful Life, and Pan's Labyrinth. But I'm going to take one of the directors and choose one of his other movies because I can't find another fantasy movie I like. So I think everybody should watch the movie that Wolfgang Peterson did right before this, especially if you have claustrophobia. It'll hit home, and it's called Das Boot. and it is a German submarine movie. It is fantastic. It's so good. Watch the director's cut though. I think it's the medium length one. There's one that's like super long. I think it's like 4 or 5 days, but just the medium length one's good enough. It's really great. My wife and I, when we were dating, we sat down and we watched Das Boot. And I won't give anything away, but we sat through like the 3.5 hours of it, and we got to like the last 2 minutes of it. And she jumped and she grabbed the remote and she goes, "Holy shit, I've seen the end of this." I go, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "I know what happens." And I go, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Sometime, somewhere, I was a kid flipping channels and I've seen the end of this movie." And I was like, whatever. And we watched the last 2 minutes and I was like, oh man, that must have really sucked for you. So those of you who have seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. But to sit through it and realize, you know who Kaiser Soze is before the movie gets to the big part. You know what it's like. So anyway, my recommendation is Das Boot.
Who's Kaiser Soze?
Kaiser Soze is not in Das Boot. I'm sorry. I was fixing my movie metaphor.
Kyle.
I'm going to do something I've never done before, and that is I'm going to recommend a single track from a single album.
Wait, what?
And
what?
Yes.
What? No.
That is
no.
Yes.
We can't let this go.
No.
We can't let this go.
Hey.
Mike Keeler.
It ties in.
Mike Keeler, you get a hold of your fucking podcast. This is the Wild West, and I don't like it.
Oh my God, this is just a fantastical one. This one isn't actually getting published.
Next month, I'm going to recommend a philosopher.
Yeah, you think this shit's bad? Next month, I'm recommending string theory, and that's just a philosophical idea. I want to recommend
entanglement.
I want to recommend track 11 from the album Turtleneck and Chain by The Lonely Island. It is called Falcor versus Atreyu, Classy Skit number 1. And I recommend you all listen to it. It starts with the Falcor and Atreyu yelling at each other, and then goes into Lonely Island territory. I won't I won't spoil it for you. You should check that out. And the reason I bring that up too, because as a general idea, I'd like to recommend The Lonely Island. If you like comedy records, especially like I liked comedy records when I was a kid, I love them when they're funny songs and they have skits in between them. And Lonely Island brought that back from the dead. So I think that's really cool. So yeah, check out Lonely Island. And I'm just going to recommend comedy. Just going to recommend a genre. Just recommend comedy.
You're recommending a concept.
What is happening?
Yeah,
what is happening?
Recommend a concept.
Yeah. We're getting.
I got kicked off for 2 months for recommending a book, as I remembered it.
It's all downhill. From
you
here.
did not get kicked off for 2 months.
I'd like to recommend a musical instrument.
Is it the oboe?
As long as it relates to the movies.
Andrew. He's too busy laughing.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, there's quite a few movies I've watched since the last time we had our podcast, and so recommendation wise, I was struggling, but I was trying to stick a little bit of the fantasy. So next month I will bring out some of the other ones that I felt were smaller paced or smaller in their production, more independent. I'll bring some of those out later. But this month, I'm going to keep with the fantasy thing, and it stars the AT&T commercial girl, and that's Werewolves Within. And I want to tell you, I went in going, this is just going to be a weird, bizarre, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And you know what? It was a fun, enjoyable movie that was kind of quirky and has that, Clue kind of feel where everyone's in a house overnight, all in the same area, all these different quirky, over-the-top characters interacting with each other while they try to figure out what's actually going on. So it fits within that genre. It's fantasy because, well, you'll see when you actually watch the movie, but Werewolves Within is my recommendation.
All right. Gabe.
Wow. I'm kind of with Tom in that I don't feel like I'm generally like drawn to fantasy type films, and I sometimes have a hard time like understanding what falls into that genre. So I tried to think back, like what fascinated me when I was a kid. What did I like as a kid? Because these films that we've talked about are clearly, targeted toward children. And I think maybe I may have recommended these before, but one of my favorite films as a child was the Sinbad movies. Do you remember the old Sinbad movies?
Yes.
With the stop motion animation?
Yep, like the Seven Voyages of Sinbad. And
I thought you were talking about House Guest.
About what? Oh, yeah. No.
You made me snort.
Like, me too. I liked Sinbad when I was younger.
Yeah. I'm older than you, Kyle. So that would be your youth. My youth was before that. And I watched.
You made me snort, Kyle. Oh my god!
I was so confused when you said stop motion. What?
Right.
Oh my God.
You don't remember that?
It's like, yeah, I like Phil Hartman too. He was in a lot of Jesus, man.
Yeah.
That's like walking in on a meeting. You're walking in on a meeting and you don't know what the topic is. You just get
Wrong
confused.
Sinbad.
Holy shit! Sorry, Gabe. Sorry.
No worries. I get it. I understand. I think I might be the oldest panelist, so I forgive you. No, the old Sinbad movies with the stop motion animation from Ray Harryhausen, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure people would enjoy them nowadays. And we do suffer a little bit, as we spoke about these films, from the visual effects not being up to what we expect. And it's the same with these. But you really have to, when you look at it and you realize that it's all like hand done stop motion animation, you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. The amount of work that went into this. I still remember scenes where these skeletons would fight Sinbad. And it was, and they mixed live action with these stop motion things. And it just was, as a kid, for me, that it was fantastic. And those were the fantasy movies I would watch. So, if you have a little time, go back in time and check them out. They're really quite fantastic.
Chasing the Argonauts, that's a good one.
I love those movies, but I'm still laughing about.
Oh my God!
Yes, I get it. I was Googling some stuff.
No,
and you type in Sinbad, and you get Sinbad. Yeah. You don't get the old movie.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I was with Kyle. I thought it was the Sinbad, the comedian as well. And when you said stop motion, it also threw me. So I was right along with him. So.
Jingle all the way, baby.
But then I wasn't gonna admit to you all that I was that lost. Thank you, Kyle.
Oh, you got it.
Okay, so
sorry, I just wanted to piggyback on Gabe for a sec. Can I get on my artsy fartsy high horse for a second? I think those movies, the Ray Harryhausen stop motion movies, are a thing that I don't want to say separates because I don't think that's healthy for communities and art. But like lovers of the craft of filmmaking and people who just like movies, if you can watch those movies and be blown away by it, despite how corny it looks now, to me, that is completely driven by my love of the art of filmmaking. Of like, this is incredible work that somebody did.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Kyle, you've already recommended just an idea, so you're
actually
the concept of comedy.
You're on a lonely island.
Well done.
My recommendation for this month is a feeling, and that feeling is spite. I believe we need more spite in this world.
Oh, yes.
Yes, Spite.
Right?
Spite. We need more spite.
Actually, mine is Wolfgang Petersen's second English movie. This movie was on rotation with The Last Starfighter and Labyrinth and NeverEnding Story, just all the time on HBO. Enemy Mine. It stars Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr.
Yes.
I just remember I always got it confused with The Last Starfighter, but it is such a good movie. It's about two enemies who become dependent on each other after they are wounded. It's a starfighter wreck, if I remember right. Or starfighter. They're starfighters. They have combat, and then they crash on a planet. So then they start depending on each other, learning about each other, and figure out that they're not as different as they thought they were. So check out Enemy Mine. Came out in 1985.
Good movie.
No.
All right.
I remember. I saw that.
Let's poke the monkey. Find out who won.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner, by decision, is the NeverEnding Story!
Wow. As it should
It's
be.
really close.
As it should be.
It should be that
Ending
close.
winner.
I go 2 votes either way and I'd be okay with it.
I never thought that we would have such a deep discussion about these two movies as we did. Like, they were really good discussions, and I'm not saying that it was bad. I'm just saying I really enjoyed listening to you guys talking about both of these films. So
I enjoyed listening to me as well.
I would say, Mike, that I think part of that is because these are such embedded stories into our childhood, and they have helped shape us as adults because of all the differences that we've shared throughout our lives, and you start relating to them in different ways as you go through, and I think that makes a big difference. These rooted movies that, well, most of us had as children, they've done something for you at some point in time. So I think that makes a huge difference.
right. Yep. No, I can agree with that. All right. We would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you use. It helps us reach new listeners. If you like us, tell your friends. If you hate us, tell your enemies. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. For September, we take the stage in a battle of the bands as pop star Never Stop, Never Stopping takes on This Is Spinal Tap. For Kyle, Andrew, Gabe, Tom, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
I'm sorry. Are you still recording? Because I want to recommend this puzzle. It's adorable. It's a cat. It's a cat painting itself, but it thinks it's a tiger. The best part is, it was drawn by a guy named Norman. You can't see it because of the stupid blur thing. His name's Norman Catwell. How funny is that? So I highly recommend this puzzle.
That's
because apparently that's the things we can recommend on this show now.
You should have saved that for next month, Tom.
Oh, I'd also like to recommend hand gestures. I'm a big fan of this one.
You're among
I'm
very few who
so
are fans.
sorry that I broke our pretty little rules.
Oh, you have no idea.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.